$900,000 was a grant and $600,000 was a loan, which is going to come against our fiscal '25 circuit breaker claim. Again, this isn't about '25, it's about '24, but I'm giving you a preview. Transportation was another big driver. Again, we're largely balanced, but that is due to a couple of things here. Part of it was circuit breaker now pays for transportation for out of district, and so some of that extraordinary relief, although the extraordinary relief was due to tuition, transportation, about $1 million of transportation was supported by the circuit breaker account. We also received emergency shelter school of origin, McKinney-Vento. That was tapped to balance. And we also received emergency shelter, the $104.89 per day per student, and that funded a bus we had to add at a cost of like $75,000 solely to support transportation to the 3 hotels. 25, I have some confidence that those non-circuit breaker funding sources might be, I think will be funded for half the year. I am not sure it's going to be funded for the whole year. So again, that's something that I'm going to keep an eye on for next year, which is now this year. Lastly, health insurance has been historically under budgeted. 24 was no exception. 25 is no exception. How we balance this off is we do charge to Title I, IDEA, school lunch, Paso Savante, the related costs of health insurance for those employees paid in those programs. I think that approximated about $1 million. The expectation is that will continue. However, I know as the mayor has mentioned, costs of health insurance has gone up by roughly 10% year over year. The increase didn't keep pace, 25 to 24. And so that is an area of concern. But again, we'll talk about that when I provide at the end of next month an F-25 update. But I feel real good about how we were able to close the year, and especially that how I thought it would go, it went. And it's nice in my world, surprises are a bad thing. And so there really weren't any. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the story for F-24.
Thank you, Mr. Rippon. That was very detailed and thorough. Any questions at this time, Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Rippon. Thank you for putting this together and giving us the amount of detail that you did. On first blush, it seems like what you call under budgeted are what we call risks, right? I mean, primarily, we call them risks at budget time. And it seems, you have successfully overcome those risks by moving funds from different lines to cover shortfalls in other areas. And thank you for doing that, because it's good to balance it out at the end. It's necessary to balance it out at the end. Moving forward, this doesn't seem like it's a great accounting practice. And I'm not an accountant like Mr. Olympio, but it doesn't seem like it's a great accounting practice when we continue to do the same thing. Right? We under budget for insurance, we under budget for special education or transportation and things like that, and then we find funds from other sources. And I suspect that if we took a historic view on how budgets are closed out here in Peabody, that those other sources might be the same sources. So for example, we don't, you mentioned Paso Avantes, and I assume that you're talking about tuition from Paso Avantes. And that came in to offset, I think, the health insurance, right? So is there a way moving forward, and by the way, this is not a criticism, this is just maybe a hope. It can't even be a recommendation because I don't have that much knowledge of what you do. But is there a way that we can account for the income and I'm just using that program as an example. There are several that you mentioned, and I don't want to go through them all tonight, but is there any way that we could take the income or the expectation of income from Pasos Avantes and just embed it in that line in the budget moving forward so that there won't need to be a transfer and there may be more funds in our operating budget available for things like health insurance and transportation and special education, so that when we look at a budget in the spring and then ultimately have to vote on a budget, we don't have to continue to say we're taking these risks?
I'll give you a short answer. Yes, what I think I'm hearing is when we do the fiscal 26 budget, because 25 is done, is we have a top line, and then off that top line, because the transfers need to happen, but I think what you want and can be done is, let's say the top line is $12 million. And we know at the time the budget is built that 400,000 is going to go to IDEA, 100,000 is going to go to Title I, and so. That's documented and pulled down as a net. So that, as reasonable as we can anticipate. I think the short answer is yes, that can be done. But again, we get a lump sum assessment quarterly from the finance director, and at that point, we put it in the operating budget, and then when we see who was on these particular programs, we then allocate the related health insurance costs to those programs. But I think, to your point, we could be a bit more detailed in those offsets. I still think we're going to be underfunded, but it's going to give a more true picture of how the year will ultimately end in that line item.
Yeah, so thank you. Again, through the mayor, thank you for, yes is always a good answer. But I think we balanced the budget, right? We had some unexpected sources of income like circuit breaker that we may not be able to realize year after year, but we also had some sources of income that we do realize year after year, whether it be from grants, because there was some money taken from grants to pay for some of these expenses, or from income, whether it be school choice or Pasos Avantes or other, again, areas that you identified. I'm just more comfortable with a historic view of those sources of income or that revenue stream and applying it to the line item than saying, I'm going to take this big risk, which causes us to, I think, I'll speak for myself, maybe me to lose sleep and have concern when we put through a $96 million budget that has $3 million in risk. So, and I don't, that was rhetorical. And to the mayor, through the mayor, the school choice money that we're getting, first of all, thank you, is that the income that we received, or the net income after expenses were paid for school choice for our students that go to other districts? Are you able, I don't know if you know that.
So it's from the revenue. I think it was given to us before the expense, because it's pretty close to a wash every year. And typically it's used to spend on the things that are on the city side, such as facilities, and usually they do that. But from that account, since they had taken the money out of our facilities account to pay for something to do with facilities, they were able to just transfer that line item from that account. It was more of an accounting practice. Yeah. I don't know that we netted $250,000 from school choice. Yeah. I think it was closer to even. Yeah. But it was sitting in that account, and the 250 was used from our line item to pay for some facilities things, and so basically that was the mechanism that they used.
Yeah, no, I didn't think it was a surplus because we typically offset pretty
Yes.
closely. So in that case, I just wanted to thank the administration for, once again, supporting education in the city and coming up with those funds to help us with this 24 budget and the 24 budget closeout. And the last item I'd like to bring up is the accounting that you just, again, through the mayor to Mr. Rippon, the accounting that you provided us tonight in really tremendous detail, and I truly appreciate it. This is this is for the operating budget and the operating budget only. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Are we going to see something similar with the grant money that we received in fiscal year '24?
That's certainly possible. We're still in the process of closing out grants, but I guess that is possible, yes.
Yeah, I realize that you and your department and your staff are extremely busy, and again, I'm grateful for the work that you do. I'm not asking for that to come to us in the next meeting, but perhaps maybe in November or some reasonable time for your staff to put that together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Any other questions, comments at this time? Okay, Mrs. Dunn?
I'm sorry, I was trying to look something up and I can't find it, but I know you'd know it right off the top of your head. Mr. Rippon, what is the percentage that the state reimburses us on the circuit breaker? Is it up to 80% yet?
75.
Ah, okay. So the legislation for 80% is coming up for this coming year. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Dr. Vidala?
Thank you all. So the next item on the agenda is the second reading of our career and technical education admissions policies and the innovation pathways. So we did ask Ms. Spinoza to be here today if there are any questions. This does require a vote, so we wanted the second reading and then any questions so that make sure that you are comfortable to vote on our admissions policy. So I'll turn it over to the committee if you have any questions for Ms. Spinoza. It is also contained in your packet again for this meeting as well. And I think it goes in, their page number 66, I believe, is where it starts.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Ms. Spinoza. Thank you. I'll open up to the school committee. Any questions, or do we want to move forward to a vote for a second reading? Mrs. Dunn?
I'll make a motion to approve the two admissions policies for a second reading. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Further motion by Mrs. Dunn, and that was seconded by Mr. Swanson. Any comments, questions? Mrs. Dunn?
Just a couple. Ms. Spinoza, thank you very much for providing these for us so that we could see this and understand about the programs. And I know at the last meeting, you gave us a nice overview of the difference between the innovation pathway and the CTE programs. One of the questions that I have is, on the innovation pathway, I know it has to be approved at the Department of Ed. Is there any plan, to go forward next year for another innovation pathway for students?
If we're thinking about adding additional innovation pathways, that would come from the direction of the superintendent and as well as the principal. So it would be all of us working together to identify which pathway would best fit into the school. Remember, too, there's space in the school that isn't often available. So when we talk about bringing in new programs, we have to look at the space to see if we can actually accommodate that.
And when you do look at innovation pathways, though, are those programs that would eventually, hopefully, become a Chapter 74 program necessarily, or?
To me, I'm a CTE girl, so I would love to have more CTE programs, but the innovation pathway is a nice opportunity for students that are looking to not only do some technical skills, but also do that advanced practice with their education. So it's just a nice opportunity for those kids.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Spinoza, for being here. And this is a little bit beyond the scope of what's on Dr. Vidala's report, but since you brought it up as being a quote-unquote CTE girl, I'm hoping that you're able to work closely with and maybe be a part of the high school building committee once it forms, so that you can identify what programs you'd like to see at the high school and what space and supports would be required, physical supports would be required for those programs.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. I would love that opportunity.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we go to a roll call vote? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman.
Yes.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Olympio.
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. All right, the next item, we have 2 overnight field trips. First one, very exciting. You may recall several years ago, the Higgins used to take an overnight field trip to Washington, D.C., and in the past couple years, they've done a day trip to Boston. This year's 8th grade class has a desire to go back to D.C. and do the overnight trip. So you'll notice in your packet, we have an item filled out by Mr. Busey and Mr. Vieta for a May trip to Washington, D.C., where Mr. Vieta and 8 of the teachers will serve as chaperones, and they have a great itinerary, and they are seeking approval to go to Washington, D.C. this May. So we'll put it out to the committee if there's a discussion or a motion to approve this field trip.
Thank you, Dr. Vidala. We'll open that up. This is done.
Well, I have a question. I know you just said that the trip would be in May. On the request, they have October to November.
That's the next field trip. That's the Raiders field trip, the JROTC.
Sorry about
There are 2 field trips,
That's
sorry.
right.
The other one is the Capital Tours trip, which I believe is May 27th through May 30th,
Okay.
2025.
All right, I apologize, missed a page there. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the field trip, and I'll add something later. So moved.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn for the approval of the overnight field trip for Higgins Middle School to Washington, D.C., seconded by Mrs. Carpenter. On the motion, Mr. Hockman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dr. Vidala. The field trip request, this trip is designed for 8th graders at the Higgins, and the field trip request has approximately 200 students. Do you have any understanding as to why we're looking at about half? I think it's about half of the 8th grade class.
Yes, and that was, Mr. Busey felt that, there are a number of families that choose not to send their children to an overnight field trip. There are fundraising opportunities. The pricing that is built in does have some scholarship opportunities as well. So we did take all that into account. But he said historically it is about 50-50 with the number of students. And I believe it may be a holiday weekend as well. So I know that some people travel. But he said historically about a little over 50% of the people go. I think it's about 60%. So they're estimating somewhere in the 2 to 250 range.
Thank you. So if I may, and I don't know that we need to, because it does say approximately, Ms. Dunn, would you be willing to amend your motion to the request amount up to the number of students actually in the 8th grade at the Higgins that are approved for this trip? So if by the grace of whatever it is, 350 of our students are able to go, they don't have to come back to us if they feel they need to. We can just clean it up.
Sure, absolutely. That's fine.
Yep. We'll make that change in the motion. Any other comments or questions, Mrs. Dunn?
Yes, what I wanted to ask is, I know this is the proposed, because it's several months ahead of time, but I would just like to ask that when it is all confirmed, that we get the confirmed itinerary so that we know where the students are going and, what day and what time and everything, just so we have that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have a roll call on that field trip.
Mr. Hockman.
Yes.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Olympio.
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, the next field trip, which is in October, our JROTC group would like permission to go to the Air Force Base in Seymour Air Force Base in Molina, Georgia, October 30th through November 5th. It's a visit and a tour of the Air Force Base, and then the Raiders have their all-service nationals competition. This has been a great trip, and we've seen quite a bit of success as well. Wonderful group, our JROTC, and they're looking for permission to attend their national competition as well.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Further motion by Mr. Hockman for the approval, seconded by Mrs. Dunn. On the motion, Mrs. Dunn?
Just to make a plug for the JROTC, they're having numerous fundraisers. They're having can and bottle drive. They're doing all kinds of different things, but one of the things they do have is a dinner at the Portuguese American War Veterans Hall on, I want to say it's October 13th. I'm sorry, I can look it up, but if you can go, it is a wonderful event. The students that come to that, they really have a nice time. The meal is phenomenal, and there's a demonstration from the drill team. If you go, it's like going to a military dinner. It's exactly what you'd go through in the military. So if you can go, please do, because the money goes for a good cause. It really helps them because transportation is outrageous for all of our groups, getting to and from places and being able to participate. But our JROTC is known nationally. They have been winning the national awards, which is really a really big deal. They've been noted by the military, so just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Roll call vote for approval, please.
Mr. Hockman.
Yes.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Olympio.
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Amico.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to have some very happy cadets, knowing that they can go to nationals again. And the final item on the superintendent's report is a philanthropic group called A Mom's Village made a donation of school supplies to the West Elementary School. So we'd like a motion to accept with gratitude, and we'll send a letter on behalf of the school committee thanking this organization for the school supplies that were donated to the West Elementary School.
Motion to follow the recommendation of the superintendent and accept with gratitude.
Second.
Great, thank you. Further motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Amico for acceptance. Roll, all in favor? That's a vote.
Thank you all. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you, Dr. Vidala. Next, we'll go to public participation. Open up the opportunity for anybody who's here today that would like to come forward and speak. The microphone would be open. Please, come on up. You can have a seat right here, and the button on the right. Hillary, if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name's Hillary Clark. I'm a brand new kindergarten parent, and I'm new to the public school system, so bear with me. I'm learning all the acronyms. So my child is a kindergartner at the West Memorial School, and I'm here to inquire about the supports being put in place to accommodate our new ESL migrant students. My concern stems from some incidents occurring in my child's classroom and the lack of additional staffing to accommodate such incidents. Obviously, I have concern for all children in our school system. However, I feel the need is urgent to address the amount of staffing and resources, specifically in a classroom with 1/3 ESL students. I have addressed these issues and specific incidents with Principal Broughton and Vice Principal Fusil, who both assured me that these concerns are on their radar. My hesitancy stems from some research done on the Peabody Public Schools' overall handling of the recent influx of migrants in the schools. In an interview last May with WBZ, Superintendent Vidala said that people get worked up when they fear that their kid is losing something. So we want to make sure that isn't happening. When we take on more, that doesn't mean something else is getting less. The goal is that everyone gets more. This should not be a win-or-lose situation, unquote. Since we have taken on more migrant students, since last May, I understand that the schools are receiving federal funds for the additional children, roughly $105 per child per day. Could you tell me what is being done in the school system with this money to address the weight of additional ESL students, and specifically in the West Memorial Kindergarten classrooms?
Thank you. I don't know if you know that we're not allowed to speak on any, unfortunately, because it's not on our agenda.
Yep.
So it's not available to the public where we can't speak. But certainly, we can come up with that information.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to respond to. 'Cause
Yes,
that's a
and I'm
good
happy to
question.
call tomorrow and have a conversation with you and talk about some of the supports that we have and also some of the plans that we have moving forward as well.
Okay,
And welcome to the Peabody Public Schools.
thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Roshan Courage. I sent out a few angry emails to a lot of you guys. So, yeah, my son also go to the same class. He's in kindergarten. My youngest one is in kindergarten with Miss Murphy in West Memorial School. She's got 20 kids, and a third of them are from the sheltering program. I don't think they might not speak English, but the class does not have, in my opinion, adequate support for the class. Such as, I think it's important to have a dedicated ELL teacher for the class. Right now, there is only one paraprofessional. She leaves at lunchtime. So I think I'm advocating for more resources to the classroom. Also, I found out that other schools in Peabody, like Brown School, for the kindergarten, they only have 12 kids per class. I don't know how this distribution become this lopsided. Also, the federal fund or Commonwealth of Massachusetts gives $104 per child from a shelter program to attend Peabody School. I'd like to know where this money is going and why it's not allocated for additional resources such as more staffing in my son's classroom, because we have a third of the class are coming from this program, this shelter, and the state is funding the city or the school with additional funding for their education as well as mine. I think without this support, these children will struggle, which affects the learning environment for all the children. That's my concern. Yeah, I think hopefully you guys will discuss that and bring more additional resources to Ms. Murphy's class. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashawn. Thank you both for being here. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Okay, anybody that would like to join us remotely?
We do have a number of people remotely. I don't see anyone raising their hand. So it looks like no one's looking to participate at this time.
Great. Thank you again for coming today. Okay, we do have two written communications, the FY25 hiring status report and the special education program descriptions. I'd open that up for any discussion and a vote to receive.
Motion to receive. We want to take them separately or together, however you want to do it.
I'm fine taking them together.
So moved.
Second.
You've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman to receive the two items today, seconded by Mr. Swanson. That's a unanimous vote to accept. Thank you. Subcommittee reports. Education, Mr. Miko.
Thank you through the chair. Dr. Chase gave us a great rundown on MCAS, and Dr. Vidala gave us a rundown as well. But we will be scheduling an ed subcommittee so we can just really dive deep into it and get your thoughts on where we're heading. But I just want to thank you, your staff, and the teachers for a great opening and great month of September. And obviously, great job that they did on that test last spring. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Miko. Finance, Mr. Olympio.
Nothing new to report, but I assume we will be meeting in the coming weeks see how we're doing with that FYI 25.
Thank you. School safety, Mr. Olympio?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Higgins provided me a little bit of a report, which I appreciated. Last week, it was School Safety Day activities in the elementary schools. 4 of them last week, 3, I presume, this week. The students participated. Peabody Police was present. SRO officers Ritchie and Long discussed numerous topics with the students: bike safety, using crosswalks, Halloween safety. The fire department was also there. They discussed safety tips for home escape plans, calling 911, and they kind of shared various equipment that they might use. And then also, too, the bus department went over just bus evacuating drills and different safety practices. So the feedback from the students and staff was very positive, and everybody, the presenters and the students, were very engaging and informative with each other. That's it. Do you have
Terrific. Thank you,
anything to say,
Mr. Olympio.
Dr. Higgins?
Just very briefly, I want to thank, of course, our Peabody Police, Peabody Fire, and both the Transportation Office and Healy. We kind of took 3 separate events in the past that may have worked towards one grade and took 3 good ideas and combined them. So all of the students at all of the schools got to have that time together. And I do want to emphasize the presenters from fire and police were fantastic. Lots of questions, very engaging with the students at their level. So a lot of people did a lot of work to put this together. We're very grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you both. Athletics and wellness.
Nothing to report tonight.
Quality and standards, Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Quality and Standards Subcommittee met this evening prior to our regular school committee meeting, and on our agenda was further discussion of waiving the energy fee. Thank you to Mr. Rippon, who came with a report for us so that the members were able to see how much money comes in on an annual basis. And it is approximately $25,000. Was broken down by the various groups that utilize the buildings. And it is, after discussion between Mr. Olympio, Mr. Swanson, and myself, we are coming to you with a recommendation to be able to waive the energy fee. However, we're not going to make that tonight because we do want to put some parameters on it. We want to be able to look at the fee structure to make sure we can see exactly how we should tailor that ability to waive the fee based upon various types of groups. We know that the fee structure has all kinds of different rules for different groups, nonprofit, within the city, without the city, et cetera. And we just want to make sure we have that all clear before we come forward with any recommendation, any complete policy. But our recommendation will be to allow the school committee to waive energy fees when the board decides that they would like to grant a waiver. So we will have another meeting probably before the next school committee meeting. Mr. Rippon, you're an integral part of this issue now, so we'll be inviting you to come back, and thank you all for your patience. But it is a pretty deep decision because it affects the money coming into the district.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you.
Mr. Hockman, on that item.
Thank you, through you to Mrs. Dunn. Thank you for the work that you do. It's meaningful and it's necessary, so thank you. The waiver that you're expecting to be putting before us in the future, is it a waiver of the energy fee for municipal use or generally?
Generally, because municipal use actually is, as far as we know, covered. If it's a school organization, they do not pay the energy fee. This is more, from what we could see, more private groups, people renting the building privately for athletic events, for, we saw a class reunion in there. I know that there was a rental in there by Congressman Moulton. Different people who rent on a singular basis. We want to be able to kind of come up with some good railings for when the school committee can grant a waiver.
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing what the proposal is. I'm a little concerned in that I think the impetus for the review of this policy was because Councilor McGinn was having a Fourth of July event at in and around the Welch School property or campus, and it doesn't seem right that the school committee's charging the city council because the funding that Councilor McGinn gets for his ward for that event comes from the municipal budget, and it just seems a little odd that we would charge and detract from what Councilor McGinn could provide to his ward, primarily kids that go to these events. So, and I'm fine with that. My fear, my concern is if we start putting in, the history of putting in the energy fee as non-waivable is because there's pressures put upon each of us for various events, and then we wind up eroding the energy fee completely, and we don't collect an energy fee, and we have a cost. And Mr. Rippon, earlier tonight, provided us with the closeout of the '24 budget, where, we're taking money from places that we don't initially allocate it to cover our actual operating expenses, and that was the point of the energy fee, was so that the user would cover their actual cost for that, and we waive other fees if we can. I think we're all as generous as we can be with these fees, and I think we're all sympathetic to the great causes, organizations, and reasons that people or entities rent or use our schools. I'm just a little leery, and if I could, I think the members of the subcommittee, thank you for listening to me, and I think I'm making my point. I look forward to what you ultimately produce and put forward to us. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Actually, if I may, Mr. Hockman, actually, your point is one we did discuss. That was one of my worries, too. And so we know that it's going to be something we really need to be very clear about so that we can be even-handed, because we know if you start to waive fees, the next thing you know, there will be more and more requests to waive the fees. So that's one of the reasons we want to look at the various categories and be able to understand, who utilizes our facilities, and actually look at the fee structure for all of the rentals, and also look at the athletic fields, which are administered by the Recreation Department, but we know they have a really extensive, we worked on that together, they have an extensive fee structure. So we want to kind of make sure everything is coordinated.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. And I was going to say, before you brought up, we had the opportunity to work on the turf football field on that committee together when we first opened up that field. Perhaps, and I'm not, certainly don't take this as me trying to, it's your committee and you should run it as you see fit, but perhaps the thoughts that we explored in that experience where there's a tiered structure for things would work for what you're looking to accomplish.
That is one of the things we want to look at.
Great, thank you. Parent and Student Advisory Boards, any update, Mrs. Dunn?
Yes, the first meeting of the Parent Advisory Board will take place this Thursday at 7 o'clock here in the Higgins Library. The agenda will be brief. It'll be kicking off the year and hearing about any agenda items that the various schools would like to explore over the next few months. So that's going to be at 7. The Student Advisory Board, I'm really sorry to tell you, they're not operating at the moment. They don't have an advisor. It's been posted. They're hoping to get an advisor, but until that time, student government is in a bit of a holding pattern. Not the class advisors are all in place. The classes are taken care of. But Student Advisory Board, and as far as I know, Student Council is all kind of on hold right now. So I am going to keep watch over it to make sure that things come to us as soon as possible. I did explain legally the Student Advisory Board is required by state law. So we'll find out soon, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Building and Grounds, Mr. Hockman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Building and Grounds met a week ago Monday. Mayor Betancourt was in attendance with Dr. Vidala, Dr. Levine, Mr. Hafey, Jim Hafey, Mr. Swanson, and myself. The focus on the meeting was almost exclusively on the center school, and we talked about some renovations, repairs. We talked about changing the tone of how we discussed that project from renovations to repairs to temper expectations around the city, because the center school is going to have some significant repairs to it that are needed, and we're thankful and grateful that they're occurring. But it's not going to be a renovation in the sense of what the Welch undertook over the last couple of years. The center school is primarily going to look the same. It's just going to have major key components that are upgraded, improved, and new. So we talked about that initially. Another aspect of this project, Mr. Hafey, working with Sharon Cameron from the Board of Health, talked about the need for including the kitchen in this project. And there was an agreement that the kitchen would be renovated to ensure code compliance and to align with the expected life of the renovated school. And this renovation or repair includes the flooring, so the tiles that are in that area would be removed, and there would be smooth, impermeable, cleanable surfaces installed. Once the roof repair is completed in that building and in that area, that kitchen area, damaged ceiling in the kitchen would be replaced. Our food services director, Maureen Rose, is going to work with various vendors to assess the equipment that we need. So, for example, one of the things Mr. Hafey talked about is we have an incredible industrial mixer in that kitchen that back when the center school, opened, was used because they would bake bread and they would bake items there for the students, and that
They
hasn't
made
happened.
gravy train.
And that hasn't happened in decades, maybe scores, so there's no need for it. So talking about replacing something like that and getting some professional help to understand how to best utilize that space that is now being created. The center school kitchen is relatively small, particularly for the population that goes there, so whatever space that they can free up is valuable. Two unused mixers. They're talking about a stove will be replaced. It's currently a residential style stove that they have in that kitchen, believe it or not, and upgrading that to a commercial grade equipment. And then there's also, presently there's a 2-compartment sink in that area, and health code requires a 3-compartment sink, so we're going to wind up replacing that. So, and then there's some storage facilities that are down the hall for those of you that are familiar with the center school and the cafeteria area. At the end of the hall, on the left side is what used to be, there's a shower. I think it used to be a locker room because the gymnasium's right there. And they're going to, it looks like, convert some of that space to storage of dry goods and things along that nature. So in any event, that was primarily what we talked about at this meeting. From what I understand, the center school project is underway. Mr. Hafey reported that materials are available and coming in as needed. We talked about painting, too. That was a big thing we talked about. There's some significant painting that's going to take place, I think, throughout the building. And we talked about utilizing the information that Ms. Dunn worked on at the Welch School, because colors on walls affect people, right? The social psychology to that is known. There's a lot of support for that. And the original plan at the center was to have one uniform color, which is typically some industrial beige or gray or something somewhat drab. So we talked about using a color palette and taking the information that Ms. Dunn generated with the Welch School and using that at the center school. And I think we agreed that we would use up to 3 colors, paint colors, so that there'd be some contrasts and some, we talked about greens and, we're in rooms that don't have a lot of outdoor light and, just things along those lines. So there is a lot of thought going into the repairs that are taking place, and it seems like we're well on the way. Materials are coming in. People are there's work that's taking place there. And it appears, from what I understand from reports that I've received, that the integrated preschool is operating, it's fully functional. I haven't received any reports of any interruptions or disruptions going on with that educational process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hockman. Oh, Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to bring up two things. One, the whole issue with the cafeteria. I'm so glad to hear about that, and I will tell you that one of the interesting meetings that I attended with the Welch was hearing the actual cafeteria staff speak about what they needed and didn't need in the kitchen. And one of the things they talked about was a huge industrial mixer that they don't use anymore because the recipes that they use are not the same as they were years ago when that equipment was purchased. And it did free up space, and they were able to give some really good insight into what was needed. So I would recommend that you speak with the people who worked in that kitchen and get their input. It's vital. They dealt with it every day, and they could tell you what they really needed. The other thing, I'm thrilled about the paint. And I really think that we should look at a bit of an upgrade in all of our schools. One of the things at the Welch that is striking is that there is a wall in each classroom with a specific color. If you could hear the architect's explanation of how they decorated the school, it was fascinating. Each grade utilizes a specific color in the classroom. So there's one wall where that color is painted. The floor carries out that color. Very, very subtle, but they said there was no color in that school, and I was stunned when they said that. And I thought, no, that school was always so bright and cheerful, and then it dawned on me. It was bright and cheerful, and every school is bright and cheerful because our teachers decorate the classrooms and they hang up our children's work. That was the only color in classrooms, and I think we'd find the same thing throughout the district because I think 20 years ago someone got a bargain on marshmallow paint, and I think we have a huge vat of that color somewhere in the district, and that is all that has ever been used on the walls throughout the school because it made it easy. You just had one color to worry about. Choosing paint colors is very important. I would suggest spending some money, seriously, and getting some good advice on colors to use in that building. And perhaps we would be able to do that in other buildings as well. The paint can make such an incredible difference. I was so surprised to see that, but I would love to see it in all of our schools, especially the elementary schools. It really, really does help. And when it's done right, it can make a huge difference for everyone. So it's worth the money. It really is.
Okay, thank you.
Just on the point of the paint, Mrs. Dunn, I could tell you that I think you're right about spending some money to get a consultant or someone to do that, because I made a motion at the subcommittee meeting that the color of the entire center school should be orange. And thankfully, the other committee members were wise enough to turn me down, so I was the lone vote in favor of that.
There's some orange at the Welch, but it's a certain shade.
All right, thank you. Special education, Mr. Olympio?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My Special Education Subcommittee met last Tuesday night. I want to thank Special Education Director Ms. Crompton attended, and also CPAC President Ms. Liz Mover attended. It was a meet and greet. Certainly it was a very productive meeting. Got to say hello to a few familiar faces and a couple of new faces. Ms. Crompton went over the new IEP form that's out, and that was interesting. Going forward, this Thursday, just wanted to make an announcement that CPAC will be meeting at 6 o'clock right here at the Higgins. Again, Ms. Mover is the president of that group, And some of the topics that they'll be discussing is an overview of the district programs. They're going to be reviewing the new IEP forms as well. Certainly, they'll discuss about CPAC and board positions that are open, and there'll be an open forum for parents to talk about. And also, Ms. Crompton will be there as well as IEP chairs. So there's a lot going on this Thursday. It's right here at the Higgins, CPAC at 6 o'clock. And then on October 8th, there's going to be a basic rights workshop. It's on Zoom, and it's from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. You have to pre-register for that, and I would maybe go on CPAC's Facebook page or reach out to Ms. Mover on how to register for that workshop. And again, that's October 8th, and it's a 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., and it's a basic rights workshop. And I'll be scheduling something in the next month or two. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. City Council Legislative Delegation, Mrs. Carpenter?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Redistricting, Mr. Hockman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We sent an email out to the composition of the redistricting committee to determine whether or not they were still available or interested in serving, because it's been some time since we've met. We believe that there's a need for that committee to get back to reconnect. As we looked at some of the class sizes around the district, and there's actually a few surprises, and I think one or two might have been identified by one of our public participants tonight. So we're going to reconvene and talk about that, I think, a little bit, and also look at how the center school shift has taken place with some of the information that was generated through the redistricting committee. So I'm hoping that given another week or two to hear from former or current members, I should say, and fill in as we need from there with recommendations from the mayor and from the superintendent. And then I'm hoping that we'll be able to meet maybe sometime early mid-November.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Performing Arts, Mr. Swanson?
No updates. I'll be meeting with Mr. Simmons prior to our next meeting.
Great, thank you. Okay, next item, item 8, new business. We do have a couple of items tonight. First is kindergarten. Mr. Amico, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you through the chair. And I want to start off by saying we have an incredible kindergarten program. We have great staff, great teachers. And there was a time, not a few years back, but many years ago, where we didn't have a kindergarten program, and I know how hard I had spoken to Representative Tom Walsh at one point, and I remember him saying how hard they had to fight to get kindergarten in schools, full-time kindergarten. And we have one, and we have a great program. My own kids went through it. And kindergarten is, for many parents and many students, their first opportunity, their first, shot at school. Some of them don't go to a pre-K program or choose to stay home. So once they get to school, that's it. That's their first experience in a school system. I do think when we did talk about budget earlier, and through the chair, Mr. Hockman had mentioned, taking calculated risks, and I do think we took some calculated risks last year at budget time, and I think some of those risks sometimes come back. Our budget wasn't great. We didn't, our Chapter 70 funding was cut. And I do think that has an impact on our schools. And I'm just thinking that this time around, when we start talking budget in February and March, that some of those items that we really think about are the early childhood programs that we have here. And, whether it's full supports, whether it's extra paras or full-time paras, those are some of the things that we really need to look at. And again, it's no one's fault. I think we have challenges, and one year the challenge could be in kindergarten, the next year it could be in third grade. I can remember one year it was in fourth grade with one of my kids. So what I'm trying to say here is I think that we really need to look at those calculated risks that we take, and we make some adjustments, and we really put some of that money closer to our classrooms where we can see and get the most out of them.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Okay, next item, Mr. Hockman, October
Could I
7th.
ask a question? Sorry, sorry, Mr. Mayor. One question. When we get our Chapter 70 money, we get $104 per student. How does the state calculate that? Is that on our October 1st number? And is that a separate amount from, one of the people said, what is it, 105 additional for migrant funding, for the emergency funding? Through you to Mr. Rippon, if I may.
Yeah, it's a separate amount. The Chapter 70 is calculated differently. This $104.89 per day per student is a separate grant, if you will, that comes directly to the school department from the Department of Ed.
Okay.
And so, just to be clear, that money was for last year?
For last
And
year,
it was
okay.
kids that were enrolled after October 1st of last year until the end of the school year. We're hearing there may be some money this year. We have not gotten confirmation of that. We don't know if it is coming. So our new students, we have to fund that from the money that we already have. The Chapter 70 formula is calculated based on, a number of things, and so we get that initial number in January. The minimum aid this year was $104 as well, which was very confusing for folks. But so if you did not get additional funds, like Peabody, I think our Chapter 70 went up 1.4 million or something like that. If your number was going to go down, the minimum aid that you would get, one year it was $30 per pupil, one year it was $60, last year it was $104. So we do not want to be a minimum aid district because that would be significant less money than we get. So we will have that number sometime in January when the governor's budget comes out, and then we can kind of go over what that means and how that will go. We're hopeful, I did talk to Sally Cairns over the weekend, we are hopeful that there will be another allocation this year to help with the influx of students.
Okay. If you could you keep us posted on that? Because I know a lot of people have been asking about that funding and if that extra funding could be used for the extra supports that are needed in the classrooms, if that would cover it. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Hockman, I'll turn to you for item number 2, October 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I put this on the agenda as October 7th is going to be the day before our next meeting, and it's the first anniversary of some horrific events that took place in Israel and in Gaza, and we're now seeing a significant escalation associated with that, the attacks that occurred on that day. I'd like to just have a conversation, maybe it's just to the administration, to ensure that there are some things that are in place on October 7th. It's going to be an emotional day, not just for people of Jewish faith, but people of every faith, I hope, right? I mean, I think humanity was shocked at some things that occurred and are still occurring, and there are also people who have a different perspective than what's being presented by the Jewish population that live in our city and attend schools in Peabody. So the point of this was, one, please, let's make sure, and I'm very confident this is already happening and you've already contemplated this. I just want to make sure that the public is aware of it, that there's supports in place for all of our students, for all of our staff, with grief counselors or with, we do have some emotional support dogs and things along those lines. It may be a very emotional day for some people. We have people in our school system, whether it's staff or students, that lost people that day, or know someone that lost people that day, and it's, I suspect, going to be an extremely emotional day. Second thing is, particularly because of the escalation of what's going on in the Middle East, I want to ensure that we have adequate security. And I know our SROs do a great job. I've already talked to Chief Griffin. He's increasing the tremendous support that they already provide us, I think, beginning this week, and he anticipates running that through the middle of October or late October, just to ensure or to help with any possible events that may occur. And they could just be events between, two people who are emotional and have different points of view. I'm not suggesting that it's going to be some sort of major attack or protest could just be a couple of kids that aren't able to agree on something and might need, a police officer or someone to kind of just cool them down and set them aside and separate them or things like that. So if we can continue to work with our first responders, particularly our police department, for that. Next, I hope that students or staff, particularly students that aren't able to attend or choose not to attend school that day, because it is going to be a day of reflection, it's going to be a day of mourning, it's going to be a day to be with community and with family and with religious organizations. There are a lot of activities scheduled for that day to commemorate or remember those that lost their lives that day, those that are fighting today, and people losing their, innocent civilians losing their lives even as we're sitting here, and hostages that are still in custody of some not so nice people. So those events are going to take place. I'm hoping students that elect to attend or participate in those activities get an excused absence. It's not a religious holiday that's on our calendar or anything along those lines, but it's certainly, I think, an extraordinary enough event that I don't want to see a student have to, or a family have to balance, well, this might be my kid's third unexcused absence, so they're not going to mourn, or they're not going to be with their grandparents, or whatever that choice is. I think we should leave it to the families, and I hope that we can do that. We can, and I think perhaps, and I don't want any of whatever we do, and the mayor has been gracious enough and supportive enough to allow Peabody to have an event at City Hall, which I don't know that we talked about the time yet, but we're hoping it's going to be about 10 a.m. At City Hall, where we're going to gather with hopefully a lot of people, but particularly I think there'll be 3 rabbis there, and there'll be congregations from temples around the city, and I hope that there's a lot of non-Jewish people there too, whether it's Muslims or Catholics or Protestants, because this is a human event. It's not, it's a worldwide human event. But so those are things I'm talking about, and that may be information that you choose to disseminate to teachers at various grade levels where you think it might be appropriate for those kids to attend, or those kids being given the opportunity to check out for for an hour and a half, and go down to City Hall and then come back with appropriate, supervision, parental supervision, and things like that. But it might not be a full day, is what I'm saying. It might be a partial day, or something along those lines. And then this is a reach, and I realize it's a reach. It's late in the day to rework curriculum, and I don't want this to, again, this is not a political subject. This is just a history subject. Things occurred, and there are facts associated with the things that occurred, and I don't know if any staff has contemplated having some information available to students on October 7 about what happened October 7, 2023, and maybe some origins of that or not. I don't know. I'm not, Mr. Amico's the educator. I'm just a guy that likes orange paint on walls in elementary schools. But again, I'm not, certainly not looking to usurp anyone's discretion here, but I just thought that it might be something that is worthwhile from an educational perspective. So that's what I have on this. I appreciate the supports that are already in place. I know that there are many, and both from educational standpoints, from human standpoints, from police and first responder standpoints, and I'm grateful for all those. I just want us to be a little more vigilant as we lead up to that day, and particularly on that day, and particularly in light of the escalation that's going on the other side of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mr. Amico?
Just quickly through the chair, and thank you, Mr. Hockman. And I know Dr. Chase and Dr. Vidal and their team will definitely have something in place. Usually, we've seen it in the past, and I think there will be something in place. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that'll bring us to the end of the agenda tonight. Items for the next agenda will be handled in the regular course. Our next meeting is Tuesday, October 8th, 2024, at 7 PM right here in the Higgins Middle School Library. Thank you for a good meeting tonight.